Outriders debuted at E3 2019 with a trailer that was certainly eye-catching, but didn't go into too much detail about how the game would play. Now that I've gotten the chance to play Outriders, it's immediately gone from a somewhat interesting shape on the horizon to one of the games I'm most excited about this year. And to get it out of the way up front, developer People Can Fly is aiming for a holiday 2020 release on current and next-generation consoles, as well as on PC. Unsurprisingly, People Can Fly couldn't reveal anything else about the PS5 or the Xbox Series X versions of the game, and the demo that I played was running on a high-spec PC. So, with that out of the way, what's Outriders all about? Well, the story of Outriders starts with an interplanetary colonization attempt gone horribly wrong. You play as an Outrider, some kind of not very well explained special forces unit sent with the first wave to establish a base on the planet Enoch. While searching for a probe that was sent down before you arrived, you discover a mysterious signal coming from somewhere else on the planet when, this happens, and the plane pretty much goes to shit. A massive storm hits, turning most of your crew into bright bursts of jelly, but for some reason, it not only leaves you intact, but turns you into a member of the Fantastic Four. Seriously, of Outriders' 4 classes, we got to play 3 in the demo, and they're essentially the Human Torch, the Invisible Woman, and the Thing. Somehow, though, I'm doubting that the yet-to-be-revealed 4th class revolves around giving you stretchy arms. At any rate, the landing is aborted, and your pal stuffs you into the cryostasis pod you rode in on, hoping that a good nap will take care of whatever weird alien magic is now flowing through your body. Surprise, it doesn't. When you wake up 30 years later, your new powers have fully manifest, and the world, while less on fire than when you last saw it, is still in pretty awful shape. That's because the would-be colonists you landed with have broken off into warring factions fighting for control of the wasteland, presumably in some kind of long-term Mad Max LARP. You conveniently find your way to the remnants of your former squad, and get embroiled in both their attempts to roll over the rubble they live in, and the larger mysteries of the planet Enoch. Sure sounds like the story from a shooter, but that's clearly not what got me so interested in Outriders. First, just to lay some groundwork, Outriders is a third-person shooter heavy on both loot and RPG progression. At first glance, it reminded me a lot of last year's surprisingly good Remnant from the Ashes, but that comparison fell away pretty much instantly. For one thing, Outriders is much more arcadey and fast-feeling than Remnant from the Ashes, and much less frustrating. As I approached the first couple of firefights and found myself surrounded by conveniently placed chest-high walls, I also worried that I was about to find myself in a standard cover shooter, but that fear too dissolved almost immediately. I suppose you could play Outriders by staying mostly in cover, but doing that would completely miss what makes it so good. Outriders designers said that they wanted gunplay and your abilities to play equally important roles in combat, and from what I saw, that balance led to some incredibly fast-paced, active fights. As soon as you get yourself out from behind cover and start engaging enemies more directly, you're able to pull off things like this. Plenty of other shooters have added magic or pseudo-magic abilities to their gunfights, but in most games that means that combat is still 90% about guns as your abilities slowly recharge, allowing you to deploy your powers maybe once every minute or so. In Outriders, your abilities charge almost as quickly as it takes you to empty your weapon's magazine, and you need to use them as much as possible to survive. Your powers come from the class you choose at the beginning of the game, each with a significantly different suite of abilities. I started with the Pyromancer, a medium-range class with probably the most blunt approach of the 3. As a Pyromancer, you can set things on fire, and that's pretty much it. Okay, it's not exactly that simple. I found one ability that lets you turn enemies into ash, temporarily freezing them in place so you can get a few shots off, and I only saw the first couple of abilities in the game, so there could be more complex skills later on. But the focus of the class is still making sure as many enemies are actively on fire as possible at all times. As a Devastator, you can cover yourself in rock armor to gain incredible damage absorption, and unleash a rock blast that knocks enemies flat. The Devastator's jumping slam ability can send enemies flying and stop stronger foes from channeling their own destructive abilities. Then there's the Trickster, a close-range damage dealer with a penchant for crowd control. The Trickster's main damage ability slices anyone in its path, temporarily freezing them in place before detonating anyone killed while under its effect. That class can also project a force field that slows enemies and even projectiles, allowing you to both avoid damage and get a few free attacks in. Then there's the ability that pretty much single-handedly made the Trickster my favorite class, letting you teleport around Outriders levels, appearing behind any enemy you can see where you can easily dispatch them. I played the demo solo, but it's easy to see how these classes will play off each other in co-op if you actually have friends. With the Devastator disrupting attacks, the Trickster teleporting in to slow down groups of enemies, and the Pyromancer just lighting everything on fire, there's lots of room for synergy even at very early levels. And that's not even factoring in the unrevealed 4th class, which I have to assume is more focused on long-range attacks, which the existing classes are lacking. But if the idea of other people relying on you in an online game feels a little too much like commitment, Outriders also seems totally viable for solo play. That's largely thanks to its generous healing system. No matter what class you're playing, you'll be able to heal back up to a certain point after not taking damage for long enough. But in battle, each class also has its own healing mechanic. Pyromancer gains health for every enemy that dies while affected by one of its abilities, which is to say, while on fire, and the Trickster and Devastator recover by killing enemies up close. Like I said, I'm all alone. I was playing alone, so I can't speak to how it feels in co-op, but based on playing solo, it actually seems a little too forgiving, and Outrider could maybe stand to be a good deal more difficult. Now, if you're listening closely, you may have just heard a monkey's paw curl when I said that, as I'm sure things get tougher at higher levels. In the portion I played though, I found myself near death a lot, but as long as I kept dealing damage, I knew I could heal through just about anything. That could very well change too, because the developers say they're still working on getting the balance right, and that it's been, in the words of People Can Fly's creative director, a total nightmare. Outriders' difficulty scales based on the number of players, and it has to take into account 4 different classes, so it's no surprise that getting the balance right has been an ordeal. On top of that baseline balance, Outriders also has an adjustable difficulty level called World Tier, which unlocks new levels based on your performance. That means that the more enemies you kill, the higher your World Tier gets, and dying can actually reduce that level. You're also free to turn it down at any point on your own if you're finding it a bit too challenging. Higher levels, though, will grant better rewards, so there's good reason to keep it as high as you can manage, even if you're not in it just for the sheer challenge. Once I hit World Tier 4, I started seeing some massive improvements in the loot I was getting. It's around that point that I started picking up gear with innate bonuses, like explosive ammo and the chance to damage nearby enemies when I was hit with attacks. Bonuses aside, most of the gear I picked up was pretty standard looking guns and armor, but the designers at the event said that things will get much stranger as you get deeper into Enoch. There's also plenty that People Can Fly hasn't revealed about Outriders yet. The demo covered just one small area and an hour or so of gameplay leading up to the first major boss. With Outriders coming out later this year, it likely won't be too long before we start seeing more of the game, including later levels and an entire new character class. And I, for one, can't wait to see it.